Welcome to Caregiver Cast with Mary Elaine Petrucci. Are you overwhelmed raising a family, working full-time, caring for a parent or grandparent? It can be challenging when you're doing it alone. Caregiver Cast helps busy, burned-out professionals reduce their stress and overwhelm to create a better caregiving experience for themselves and their loved one. Caregiver Cast brings caregivers together with experts who provide information in a variety of areas. In each episode, you'll get tips on topics such as finance, legal, medical, self-care, community resources, mindset, and more. We're here to make your caregiving journey a more rewarding one. Acquire the confidence and skills to be a more capable caregiver by implementing the resources and strategies from these expert thought leaders. Get a community of support, resources, and strategies for your caregiving journey inside the Caregiver Lifeline community. Visit caregiverlifelinecommunity.com. And now here's your host, Mary Elaine Petrucci.
Hi, welcome to the Caregiver Lifeline Summit, Fall 2022. My guest speaker today is Dr. David Bernstein, who will be talking to us about using the power of 5 for better health, wellness, and combating the hazard of loneliness. Before I formally introduce Dr. Bernstein, I'm just going to give you some background information about him. Dr. Bernstein, MD, is a highly respected, award-winning physician who is board certified in both internal medicine and geriatrics, practicing in Clearwater, Florida. His 40 years of experience have provided him with opportunities to observe and empathize with thousands of adults as they age. His insight and ability to monitor patient patterns and outcomes compelled him to share what he has learned with others. He has integrated his experience in practice with up-to-date research to develop a strategy to enhance longevity and vitality. Dr. Bernstein is a graduate of Albany Medical College. He has served as chairman of his hospital's pharmacy and therapeutic committee for 20 years, helping to improve patient safety and outcomes. As an associate clinical professor in the Department of Medicine at the University of South Florida College of Medicine, he has taught the skills he has encountered and acquired over the years to go further. He has taught the skills he has acquired over the years to first and second year students. Dr. Bernstein is an engaging and entertaining public speaker addressing various medical topics with his colleagues and with the community at large, with a focus on individuals and families facing the complex problems of aging, longevity, remaining healthy, and youthful. Welcome to the Caregiver Lifeline Summit, Dr. Bernstein. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thanks for that lovely introduction.
You're welcome. So, where do we start? Do you want to start with a definition of loneliness?
I got my thing here.
Oh, please.
Wind me up and I'm ready to go.
It's yours now, Dr. Bernstein.
Did you know that loneliness is a health hazard? Did you know that the health risk of loneliness is the equivalent of smoking 15 cigarettes a day or being obese? And this does not even consider the pain and the mental anguish associated with the feeling to you today about the physical and mental health risks associated with loneliness and what can be done to offset the health risk and discomfort. I'm Dr. David Bernstein. Practicing internal medicine and geriatrics for 40 years has given me an up-close view of the successes and failures of my patients as they age. My presentation today is a combination of those observations and years of research on healthy aging, longevity, and caregiving. The learner's objectives of this presentation are to be able to identify inflammation as a contributor to the major illnesses facing society, To be able to identify 5 leading causes of inflammation and illness, and to understand the role of loneliness contributes to caregiver burden and what can be done to minimize the impact.
Thank you. That's really powerful. I'm looking forward to finding out what all the other information you have to share.
The demographics of caregiving and the profoundly negative impact on caregivers is astounding, and it's poised to get worse. With our aging population, lack of caregivers, and healthcare system being unprepared to address the needs, we all have to prepare ourselves to manage the tsunami of caregiving on our own. Today, more than 1 in 5 Americans, or 21.3%, are caregivers, having provided care to an adult or child with special needs at some time in the past 12 months. This totals an estimated 53 million adults in the United States, and it's increased by 10 million in the past 5 years. This total number of unpaid caregivers is staggering, and the cost of lost wages is incredibly high. Paying attention to our environment, and by this I mean external surroundings and inside our bodies, can teach us how to work within our own situations, guiding us to ensure better health for our body and our brains. In other words, paying attention to our environment can teach us to age gracefully, feeling physically and mentally healthier, live longer, reduce our risk for developing chronic diseases. Remaining healthy is an essential ingredient for caregiving. Furthermore, the lessons I've learned from treating my patients and from my research prompted me to change my own lifestyle. You see, I discovered that I was exposed to many of the health risks that I'll be addressing today. I am now living the formula of each aspect of the Power of 5 that I will share with you today. Before I go on, you should know that today's presentation is science-based. I may incorporate patient examples as illustrations of what can go right and what can go wrong. I've changed the names and any identifying features of my patients to protect their privacy. I hope you will find the information in my presentation worthy and incorporate the Power of 5 in your life. While searching for the best method of making my formula understandable and digestible, I kept it very simple. You see, our brains are wired to recall small pieces of information at a time. Limiting the Power of 5 to just 5 easy to remember modifiable factors enables us to easily incorporate it into our lives. The Power of 5 comprises 5 S's that together make up the formula. Each S is linked to a major controllable cause of aging and illness I see every day as a physician. There are 3 main causes of illness and disability that I want to talk about today: cardiac disease, cancer, and neurodegenerative diseases like dementia and Parkinson's disease. These are there are specific traits that they have in common. As I reviewed the conditions associated with aging, I focused on the thread that they all have in common. That thread is inflammation. So the next question you would ask is, what is my definition of inflammation? Well, inflammation is the body's first response to an injury. It could be something as innocuous as a splinter from a piece of wood. Our bodies respond with redness, swelling, heat, warmth, and altered function. This cycles and continues until the offending stress or intrusion is relieved. In other words, until the splinter is removed. Therefore, when there is ongoing stress, physical or emotional, the inflammatory process becomes chronic and leads to the diseases I've just delineated. Now, I've identified that chronic inflammation is a major contributor to cardiovascular disease, cancer, and neurodegenerative diseases. The next question to ask is, what triggers the inflammation in our environment? Here are the environmental elements that trigger the inflammatory reaction in our body that I've alluded to. The 5 S's, and they're sweets, sweat, sleep, sweat, and sex. So First is sweets. This refers to sugar, high carbohydrate ingredients within our diet that we need to limit. The second S is stress. It's been determined as a leading cause of illness, particularly cardiovascular disease and probably cancers. Another element that needs to be curtailed in our lives. Sweat. This refers to exercise, which we need to incorporate into our daily routine.
Right. Yeah.
Sleep. This refers to the necessity for rejuvenating our brains and our bodies at night. And my favorite one, which is sex, which includes aspects of socialization, companionship, intimacy, and spirituality. And it refers to the benefits of having interactions and relationships with other people. We can engage and exchange the word sex and spirituality, even though they don't mean exactly the same thing, because both relate to relationships between individuals and higher powers. The opposite is this element is loneliness, which is a health hazard. And we will discuss this in greater detail during the remainder of this presentation. So I'm mentioning here, and I will emphasize throughout this presentation, that it's never too late or too early to make changes necessary to improve the quality of life. Yet I do recommend starting early or as soon as you possibly can.
Mm-hmm.
Now that I've provided you with all 5 elements in the power of 5, I will focus on the final S, sex, socialization, connections, intimacy, and its opposite, loneliness. Toward the end of the presentation, I will circle back and include what each of you can do to incorporate the 4 other S's into your lives. So, sex, intimacy, close physical contact, and having meaningful relationships with people is a critical piece of a puzzle to staying physically and mentally healthy and living longer. When we are in the presence of a loved one, we have a greater purpose in our lives. We eat better and healthier, we exercise more, we rest, we sleep, and hopefully have less stress. Finding and maintaining intimate connections is also part of what I consider sex. It's not always about the act of sexual intercourse, although that sure adds to the potential pleasure. In the years leading up to the development of the Power of 5 formula, I had been learning about that loneliness was mushrooming as a serious health problem. It is now considered an epidemic. I frequently point out that the opposite of sex is intimacy. The opposite of sex and intimacy is loneliness. Loneliness is now the focal point of major research programs being developed by, among other organizations, the American Medical Association and the Center for Disease Control and Prevention, to understand how to address and provide solutions. That's what they're working on. So what is loneliness? Well, I like this. Loneliness is essentially the feeling of being uncomfortable or in distress when someone feels that there's a gap between the connection they would like and the connection they actually have. You can be in a crowd full of people, you can know all of them, and you can still feel lonely. So you might have a lot of superficial social connections, but what you really want is something deeper, someone to know you on the inside. It's really based on the perception of the difference between the relationship you'd like and the relationship that you have with others. There's another definition that I like to use, and this is from Vivek Murthy's book called Together. And he describes loneliness as the subjective feeling that you're lacking the social connections you need. It can feel like being stranded, abandoned, or cut off from the people with whom you belong, even if you're surrounded by other people. What's missing when you're lonely is a feeling of closeness, trust, and the affection of genuine friends, loved ones, and community. I have another and smaller example of my definition of loneliness, and it's loneliness is a feeling of being cut off from your tribe.
That makes perfect sense.
In 2021, an online survey found that 36% of all Americans, which includes 61% of young adults and 51% of mothers with young children, feel serious loneliness. The Center for Disease Control and Prevention found 63% of young adults also suffer significant symptoms of anxiety and depression. That means we have a generation of young people hungry for deeper connections who often do not have the skills or the opportunities to achieve it. For many, especially young people, this is complicated by unrealistic social media lives, which are often unattainable. That only amplifies the loneliness that young adults feel. There was a report that came from the National Academies of Science, Engineering, and Medicine. It revealed that more than 1/3 of adults 45 or older reported feeling lonely, and about a quarter of the adults over 65 were considered to be socially isolated. And social isolation in itself was associated with a 50% increased risk for developing neurocognitive disorders and other serious medical conditions. No one is immune to loneliness and the social isolation, but there are certain groups who are at increased risk. Julianne Holt-Lunstad, a psychology professor at Brigham Young University, was the first US researcher to publish a large-scale analysis of studies establishing poor social support as a major contributor to morbidity. Her research showed that people with strong social relationships are 50% less likely to die prematurely than people with weak relationships. Even more striking, she found that the impact of lacking social connections on reducing lifespan is equal to the risk of smoking 15 cigarettes a day, and it's greater than the risk associated with obesity, excess alcohol consumption, and the lack of exercise. Simply put, Holt-Lunstad had found that weak social connections can be a significant danger to our health. When loneliness persists, the same stress hormones that surge to provide short-term protection instead produce long-term destruction as they increase cardiovascular stress and inflammation throughout our bodies. This damages tissues and blood vessels and increases the risk of heart disease and other chronic illnesses that I mentioned earlier in this presentation. Studies have also found that loneliness leads to changes in gene expression in white blood cells, which results in increased inflammation and reduced defenses against viruses. Think about that relative to COVID. Mm-hmm. There's also some of the metabolic consequences and neurochemical changes that occur contribute to inflammatory process. For many people, there's even an inability to identify that they're lonely. Society has changed in the past century. Think of all the things that have occurred with industrialization and technological advances. We went from a farming and production-based economy to a high-tech society. We used to visit a family face-to-face, often spending an entire weekend day with our extended family, culminating in Sunday dinners. Now, with upward mobility, the internet, smartphones, estrangement, we don't make connections with our family the way we did not too long ago. And housing has changed. Neighbors are not what they used to be. We've lost yet another way of connecting with other people. And I hardly have to explain what happened to connections because of the COVID pandemic. This major health hazard, loneliness, captured my attention several years ago and prompted me to include and focus on it when discussing sex and socialization. I wish to impress just how extremely important this subject is, especially to men. Men do not like and they don't admit that they're lonely, and they're less likely than women to admit feeling lonely. Men have a tendency to be competitive and individualistic. They tackle projects by themselves. They work in silos. There is truth to the adage, men never ask for directions. Men are joiners. They often go at life alone. They'll suffer in silence as if it's required of them. Over time, their loneliness will deplete their energy and change their personalities and erode their health. There is plenty of data to back this up, and one could consider this a life without intimacy. Yet there are examples of men who do join group situations. They will take part and enjoy interactions with other men and gain from the experience. I understand this and have experienced it firsthand. It takes a desire and an intention I'll use that word a lot during the presentation, to meet new people, make
Mhm.
friends, expose oneself to opportunities to make connections with other men. The process goes better when we make ourselves vulnerable and authentic.
Mhm.
Now, I want to present my version of what relationships look like. So visualize, if you would, relationships like as 5 concentric circles moving out from the most intimate level of intimacy,
Mhm.
loving, committed partners, followed by family, then companionship, followed by connections, and finally community. As we proceed, I will describe and give clear examples of each of these relationship circles, and later we'll provide methods of fortifying each. I will interject short vignettes to illustrate the connections and entertain the audience. First, I want to address sex and companionship from the perspective of a practicing physician and geriatrician. As part of my research, I did interview Dr. Ruth Westheimer and included her thoughts and recommendations about the healthy incorporation of sex in relationships. And boy, she was pretty graphic about what it was all about.
Mhm.
I have, as I have interacted with my patients in my practice and explored the literature, I have concluded that we are more tame than we're portrayed in the movies. Younger adults have more time, energy, and curiosity, and do have more active sex lives than older adults. But I have discovered there is a natural evolution. So I have a patient named Amanda and Bill, and here's a case I want to share. My slide indicates the couple, Amanda and Bill, and they raised a family with a special needs child. And Bill worked crazy hours as a undercover police officer.
Mhm.
Um, Scheduling time for intimacy suffered in their formative years raising their kids, but they were able to rebound when the kids went off to college. In our hectic lives, it would be easy to lose the spark that you and your mate and partner shared when you were younger.
Mhm.
Maintaining a date night or some other activity that allows you to keep the flame burning can be crucial to sustaining intimacy in your 50s and later life. As we see in the studies reported by reputable research centers, intimacy in the older adult can be directly related to what occurred in prior years. According to the sexual research group, the Kinsey Institute, there is no age limit on sexuality and sexual activity. While the frequency or ability to perform sexually will decline modestly as seniors experience normal physiologic changes that accompany aging, reports show that most men and women between ages 50 and 80 are still enthusiastic about sex and intimacy. I love telling the story about one of my patients, Glenda, in her mid 70s, and what happened when I assumed she was not sexually active with her husband. Actually, I really thought she was sexually active with her husband, but I didn't want to embarrass her. So I pretended I thought she wasn't active, but I really thought she was. Well, all I can say is my plan didn't work. And she gave me an earful as she told me how important her intimate relationship with her husband was.
Mhm.
I'll return to this type of connection and community later in this presentation, if time permits. But what's clear to me is that the phenomenon of use it or lose it holds true for many adults as they age. According to a survey conducted by AARP and the National Council on Aging, the clear majority of men and women aged 45 and up say that a satisfying sexual relationship is important to their quality of life. And among those 45 to 59 with sexual partners, some 56% said they had sexual intercourse once a week or more. Among 60 to 70-year-olds, with partners, 46% of men and 38% of women have sex at least once a week, as did 34% of those 70 and older. There is a problem. The physical changes that occur with age can give older people a chance to revitalize their lovemaking by focusing more on intimacy and closeness instead of sex alone. Often less preoccupied with performance, they can express their affection and closeness in other ways, such as cuddling, kissing, and stroking. Unfortunately, this is the unfortunate part, there is a partner gap, which inhibits women's social and sexual activity as they reach their senior years. Now, returning to concentric circles, I regard the next 4 types of connections as easily identifiable in our lives and worth considering as they give our lives perspective. So this next one is about family closeness and bonds. In this graphic, family forms the next level of intimacy. Even though we don't choose our families, we cannot help sharing genetic material, and if all goes well, we'll have connections for life. One would hope that when all is said and done, it is a lasting connection we can count on if all others fail. Many people find such love and sustenance in these relationships. One such example is that of Peggy Sue and her sister Ellen. These 2 of 4 siblings in their family have remained the most connected. Much is because of the 18-month age difference between them and shared experiences when they were growing up. As they matured, they may remain confidants, supporting each other through their many accomplishments and challenges. When parents or other siblings in the family became ill or suffered a setback, as a team, they were involved and supportive, as if they were tending to each other. Peggy Sue, in particular, because of her work schedule, would drop whatever she was doing to attend to a family member's needs, regardless of geographic separation and the medical ailments each has had to address. They have maintained their close, loving, intimate relationship that, with love, luck, and effort, can be shared by siblings in a family. The bonds of a family are magical. While they might survive with a little attention, working to maintain the relationship fosters and enables them to thrive. So as we work out from the center of intimacy schematic that I've shown, I would identify the next as companionship. Those 5 close relationships. Most people could identify 5 individuals in their lives at any one time who could fit the bill as those truly intimate partners. These are the friends you could call on at the moment's notice. They know you so well that they can help you at time of your own paralysis. These are intense relationships, I suspect, between individuals of the same sex, but are as strong and lasting as those between a husband and wife. One such relationship I've observed is between Peggy Sue, yes, a recurring character in this presentation, and Janet. They met at religious school when they were just 8 years old. During high school, like many children, they lost contact, but they reconnected when they got to college. They have been like sisters to each other ever since. Peggy Sue and Janet have nurtured each other through the challenges of marriage, divorce, work, hardships with family, and other health crises. Each just dropped whatever she was doing at the time to provide immediate support when needed. They speak on the phone many times a week and are aware of the intimate details of each other's lives. There is never a question of whether either person will be available. It's a 24/7 unconditional love and support. Now, as we move out from the schematic, I'm going to go to the identity that I call connections. Most of us can recognize this group of 10 to 30 friends. It's those we might have over for dinner, hang out with in book club or mahjong groups. For men, it might be guys who play golf, cards, poker, or bowling, and could even include coworkers. Couples do this as bridge partners, bowling teams, or even mixed doubles, tennis, and golf groups. What might have started out as a group of individuals with a common purpose, if held together long enough, often evolves into a group of highly supportive adults who can have surprising influence in the time of need for companionship. I'm always delighted to hear about how a patient's group of friends rallied to his or her side to support her. As a physician, I've seen this among a group of retired Salvation Army officers. In their professional lives, they worked with each other in different locations toward a common goal, leading their organization. In retirement, They became a family. This tight-knit group of friends went to church together, had dinner after church, and supported each other in their daily lives. Many of the men play golf together, even though they recognized that their performance was terrible. I heard about it all the time. Since most retired to Florida, their immediate families were out of state, further encouraging the supportive network to develop and strengthen. The sense of intimacy in this type of relationship is extraordinary. It may not be sex, but it's very close and very special. The next and last ring in my schematic is the most outer ring that represents our relations in our community. These are the people we see regularly in our community. The community might be a large corporation, a religious organization, a civic or community group or board. While I've had relationships myself in each of these circles, I had my own special experience when I served on a board of a community service organization. I developed bonds over the years while serving on this community board that has broadened my view of the world and connected me to people I would never have met, allowing me to add to the circle of relationships that have strengthened my life. As you can see from the concentric circles in my schematic view, sex and intimacy are for everyone, regardless of class, gender, or age. All individuals have to find where they fit in within the concentric circles and recognize that their area of connection. If you are human, the closeness that comes from interactions with others and the warm feeling derived from connections and support are an important component of living and growing older. In our society, it's true that seniors more frequently experience the loss of a loved one, partners, or close friends. But these last chapters of life can be fulfilling. Those who age well experience the benefits from close relationships with others. They enhance their lives from lessons learned. Regardless of age, very satisfying relationships, both old and new, remain possible. We cannot stand alone. We need genuine connections to others in our universe. The results of that relationship and those with immediate family are lifetime connections. They have special importance and benefit from being attended to with love and respect. Making regular phone contact and visiting in person helps maintain the bonds. Attending family member milestone events goes a long way to cementing the bonds. Forging and maintaining a lifelong friendship is another way to ensure companionship and connections that provide support and comfort when family is neither accessible nor available. We begin many of these relationships in childhood. They develop more deeply and powerfully as we progress through our years in school and starting out in the world afterwards. There is an effort needed to maintain the strength of the relationship that needs to be expended. As we move through life, developing these types of relationships becomes more difficult. Looking for and finding them can be a challenge, so we have to be more intentional about making friends and acquaintances. We need to put ourselves out there at our place of work or join a group such as church or synagogues or other affinity groups to meet people who share common interests. Another way is to develop a hobby or join a group where you can meet like-minded people. Mahjong or bridge groups or golf bowling leagues are among some of the accessible options. Joining a club that travels or the Red Hat Society or a singing group like the Sweet Adelines can provide opportunities to flaunt your talent and simultaneously meet like-minded people. Taking a class at a local college or adult education program or a local photography class may put you in contact with others who share the same interests as well. If it is not people you need, consider adopting a pet. Animals can provide considerable companionship, and believe it or not, at the very least, give you something to talk about when you're in the social situations while developing new relationships. Taking your dog to a dog park is an excellent way to interact with other people who share common interests and concerns. I've recommended this to many of my patients while I was practicing. And it may sound simple, but invite friends over for dinner. My wife and I have established a great way to get together with our existing friends and introduce them to one another. We've developed a list of 40 or 50 favorite people in our lives and invite them to join us for dinner once a month on Friday nights. It's a great way to start the weekend off right. We use an online software program where the guests RSVP without knowing who else will be attending the night. We limit each dinner to 12 guests, and when they arrive, it surprises everyone to see who else is in attendance. We all have a great night. The conversation is always different and stimulating, and everyone compliments me on my grandmother's chicken soup recipe that I make and on the delicious dinner, healthy dinners that my wife Melissa has prepared. And here are some other ideas to consider as avenues for making new and potentially meaningful connections and avoiding the trap of loneliness, because that's what this presentation is all about. So join a club, chess club, photography, golf. Enroll in a class, a good chance to meet like-minded people, like a dance class, Tai Chi, yoga. AARP has excellent programs and also free college classes such as art and history. Find part-time work exposes us to many people of all ages and backgrounds. And volunteer, community boards, Humane Society, Habitat for Humanity, public school assistant, or a reading teacher. So what does all this have to do with caregiving? Well, first, just the knowledge and understanding that the issue of loneliness exists is a starting point. Just like one admits that they have a physical or emotional illness or an addiction, it starts with admitting the problem. Next is making a concerted effort done with intention to seek out connections. For those of us who are not used to this type of activity, it will feel awkward at first, like wearing shoes on your wrong feet. But over time, we can become more comfortable and do it in a genuine fashion. I can attest to this because in my current state of having a little bit more time on my hands, I've gone out of my way to introduce myself to people and set up a coffee date or a lunch appointment, and even doing some things on Zoom. So it's not unattainable. As I near my conclusion, I want to fulfill my promise to circle back and show a few more slides. Circle back, and provide suggestions to address the 4 other elements of the Power of 5 formula. Because adding these elements and improving health goes a long way to help overcome loneliness and the risk of inflammation on one's health. Sweets. Make adjustment to your diet to meet your needs and your care partner. Work on reducing sugars and carbohydrates as they promote inflammation. Individuals with neurodegenerative diseases crave sweets, but they're harmful to their brain and should be avoided. Next is stress. Avoidance works best, but adding meditation and mindfulness can be important elements along with keeping a journal. And I love to show this slide of relaxation response because it's really a way to meditate and find a way to rid your brain of excess thoughts. Now, I'll take a moment to digress and talk about some of the warning signs of caregiver stress. Feeling overwhelmed, lonely, guilty, sad, or constantly worried. Feeling fatigued most of the time. Becoming easily irritated or angered. Lack of interest in activities previously enjoyed. Significant changes in weight or sleep habits. Frequent headaches, neck or back pain, and abuse of alcohol or drugs. So here are a few tips that I put together to help caregivers think about what they can do to reduce some stress. Try to lighten the load by learning about local caregiving resources. If your loved one is not bedridden, consider using some sort of emergency response system like a necklace or a bracelet. Make a list of your priorities, including those that pertain to your own well-being, and establish a daily routine. Try to find time to be physically active as much as possible. Get enough sleep, eat properly, make time each week to do something you enjoy. Set realistic goals around household chores. Stay in touch with family and friends, but Say no to requests that you can no longer easily handle. If you need financial help take care of a relative, don't be afraid to ask. Similarly, don't hesitate to ask for and accept, I
Mhm.
underline accept, help from others. Social support is a powerful stress buster, and besides family and friends, there may be support groups for caregivers in your situation. The next part of my pentagon is sweat, and I recommend between 150 and 450 minutes of exercise a week. That could be as little as 30 minutes a day or 90 minutes a day, but there's somewhere in there is the sweet spot that research has really found to be quite effective. And it doesn't matter which exercise you want to do. I've put slides of doing exercise like calisthenics at home, and you see that's kind of a funny slide. And then cycling is one that I really like, and that's me on the bicycle at Lake Tahoe and me downstairs on my Peloton bicycle. I've also done yoga, which I think is really great. It's helping me recover from a hip problem. I've done Pilates, and I've also done Tai Chi. I
Mhm.
also have this slide here about what's called compound exercises that I can done at home from a book, but also working out with a personal trainer, so that you can use different parts and different movements in your body at a given time that can really work on balance and brain function all at the same time, because this compounding of this exercise makes you really work at your brain. And the next item is sleep. And I recommend, and I follow the recommendations of specialists, 7 or 8 hours of sleep, of high quality sleep every night, to help maintain mental and physical health. If you're not sleeping well, consult with your doctor. And by the way, pills and medication are not the answer.
Mhm.
Now that looks like a very satisfying picture of somebody who's sleeping well.
Yeah,
But that cat
I
does
love
not
it.
live in my house. Um, and then the last item we've talked about already is sex. And it just goes to show that intimacy, friendship, and work and getting together with people is just really important. I want to add a few recommendations about addressing stress and loneliness for caregivers. And I put together a few solutions that I thought would be helpful. Have a well thought out plan from the very start, one that includes escape valves and individuals who can help provide help or a bailout. Again, I'm going to repeat this, and it's ask for and accept help or relief when offered. Too many people, in my experience, have declined help when someone has offered it. And I want to make a point about the opposite, is that if there's someone out there who knows a caregiver and you want to offer to help, be real specific, because they'll often turn you down. But if you say something like, can I come over and spell you for a little bit? I can come over and read to Bill or play chess with him, or take him to a movie so that you can clean up the house, or you can do some of the chores that you really want to do. If you make very specific offers, it goes a long way to helping people.
Mhm.
And next is know your limitations, avoid overextending. Have a plan that includes respite. Another thing that I've seen as a physician that people just don't want to take, they want to take the whole burden 24/7,
Mhm.
365. Uh, but the problem is, without relief, you're at risk of failure. And if you fail, if your health fails, it's a major crisis.
Mhm.
And so it's important to take care of your own physical and mental health. And as I said, a major crisis develops if you, the caregiver, becomes ill or incapacitated. This
Mhm.
is a major reason for incorporating the Power of Five into your life. That's why I presented it today. Take time for yourself. You will need to get away for periods to shop, go to a movie, be with friends, attend support groups if appropriate. And remember the Power of Five components as they apply to maintaining your own health. Remember, 5 fingers on your hand, 5 fingers on your hand,
Yeah, got that.
5 senses,
Mhm.
5 words that begin with the letter S. So address stress with either learn or do meditation and maintain a healthy diet, get 7 or 8 hours of sleep each night, exercise, and maintain connections with others.
Mhm.
Respecting your needs is essential to addressing any stressful situation, especially stress associated with caregiving.
Mhm.
So I'm showing you the power of five again: sweet, stress, sleep, sweat, and sex. As I conclude the presentation on the five elements that affect our health with focus on loneliness, sex, intimacy, socialization, and connection, I hope it's become clear that the power of five is a tightly intertwined group of elements that lead to better health, well-being, and longevity. And our personal connections might just be the emotional glue that holds the power of five together. I encourage all attending today's program to develop your own plan to connect with others and avoid the consequences of loneliness that I've spoken about today. Elaine, if you wish, I can maybe handle a couple of questions.
Sure. That was an amazing presentation, Dr. Bernstein. And I like the way that you had incorporated loneliness as the opposite of sex or a connection with someone. Can you give us some idea of if somebody doesn't have the ability or a caregiver who can do an activity or take the person to an activity that they enjoy, what other recommendations can you give caregivers if there really aren't a whole lot of like community resources?
Well, there is one community resource that's available everywhere in this country, and it's the Area Agency on Aging. So if anybody has a problem, calling that number, they're the resource. They're the funders for all of these programs in their area. And they're a really good starting point to kind of address what's out there, because caregivers are totally overwhelmed. It's as if their brains can't engage and get the gears together, nor do they have the skills to think about what's out there. But the Area Agency on Aging is one area. There are people in the community who have degrees in gerontology and sometimes called geriatric case managers, and consulting with a geriatric case manager is another example of a starting point. Now, those geriatric care managers do work on a fee-for-service basis, but they can arrange and help find the least expensive opportunities for doing things and getting community resources. So those are a couple of places to go. I'm so proud of being a geriatrician for my 40 years in practice. And I took a lot of interest in knowing what's going on out there. I'm sorry to say, for many reasons, there aren't many of us geriatricians around, and the timing that a regular physician has, or even a physician extender to do some of this stuff is lacking. So it's not like you're going to get it there. And there are other opportunities within, maybe a church or synagogue where people know who some of the social service connectors are out in the community. And if there's another message that I've related here is start early. Make sure you have a cadre of friends. This was, when the horse is out of the barn, it's really hard to get things lined up. But if you're listening to this as a child of a parent and in your 40s or 50s or 60s, it's time to line up your friends, know who they are. If you've been isolated and lonely yourself, get out and make those friends and make those connections so you're prepared. Our health system is not, it's ill prepared to deal with the tsunami of people who are going to need caregiving. And without getting too political, we just don't have enough caregivers in this country. And we're not letting any additional ones in to do some of the caregiving that's going to be needed. And the government knows, and the healthcare industry knows this, that there's a shortage of healthcare workers and caregivers. So it's going to be a problem, and you have to, pull up your bootstraps and be prepared to do it on your own and with friends and connections and socialization.
Those were really great points. Thank you, Dr. Bernstein. So let's say you are someone that is being cared for, um, how can one go about letting the caregiver know that you need more connection because family and friends no longer come to visit because they know that you have a debilitating disease like Alzheimer's or some other medical condition that limits those interactions with others? What can the one that you're caring for ask for when somebody's caring for them, or what can a caregiver do to, I guess, intervene?
Um, I think I think if I'm understanding your question is, you have to find those places to ask for help.
Okay.
Um, our society sometimes doesn't like to ask for help, and it's awkward, it's embarrassing. Uh, Dementia, which is a major component of people who are getting care, we'll call that the care partnership between the care partnership could be a husband or a wife or spouses or love partners or something like that.
Mhm.
It can also be a caregiver who comes in from outside to do the care because they sometimes it can get burned out and have some of the same things because they get so involved. But I think the part of this is that you need to learn how to ask for help, and um, and sometimes you have to script this stuff out. Sometimes you need someone who's professional to help, but
Mhm.
um, it would be like I've had patients and I've said, well, wasn't Bill friendly with some of the guys you played golf with? Do you think you can call up some of his golf friends and have them come over and spend some time playing cards with him?
Mm.
It's you know this that people who are at home with care a care recipient or care partner who has dementia, their friends behave as if it's a contagious disease. And if you move,
Mhm.
a mile from where you used to live, it's as if you dropped off the earth. I mean, that happened with my parents. I think they moved 6 miles and all their friends disappeared. And they weren't ill. They just moved to a different, they moved to a retirement community.
Mhm.
So that was kind of a sad thing for me to experience because I encouraged them to move. And it's like, your friends disappeared.
Mhm.
They ran away like cockroaches. I live in Florida. We have a lot of cockroaches. Not in my house, but they ran over, scurried away.
Mhm.
But it's sad. But making a call. I know you played golf with Bill for 16 years. Do you think you
Mhm.
can come over and read to him or watch TV or watch a ball game with him or take him out for lunch? Those are a couple suggestions about things that everybody needs to learn about doing, and you'd be surprised that people won't say no if you call and ask. And maybe as a society we're not really good about asking for help, but I think you have to ask. I think that's part of it.
I agree with you. Asking for help is a very challenging thing for caregivers to do. However, I think caregivers have to also be aware of the person that they're taking care of. So, for example, I had caregivers for my father who had a memory problem, not Alzheimer's, and the caregivers never, well, some of them never made an effort to ask my father what he was interested in, or to make phone calls for him or anything like that. So I think we also have to educate, I think, some of the caregivers that we hire sometimes.
Yes. I want to interject for a minute
Okay.
because in among the projects I'm working on is a really neat, interesting project. A man became my patient, and he was one of the very few individual patients who I got a little file from the gerontologist with his information, and he played in the first two Super Bowls. which
Oh
was,
my
you know,
goodness.
I'm just a man, but I'm interested in
Wow.
sports. I know about the first two Super Bowls, and this guy was coming into my practice, and he had dementia. And he probably had chronic traumatic encephalopathy,
Right.
and I took care of him until he needed to move to a different retirement community. And I stayed friendly with his daughter, who has a background in education and she knows technology, and she's come up with this really neat technique of being able to share a short video vignette with people who would be caring for him, either in the
Okay.
retirement community. I think
Mhm.
um, companies that do home health care or send in care workers or the families just make a short little video of Tom and see to it that they know that he has grandchildren, and there's a picture of him with grandchildren, and he liked to go to ball games, and he liked to play chess, and this was his job, and this was his
Mhm.
accomplishment, so that somebody doesn't come in and you're just not taking care of a 76-year-old man who has diabetes, that he's a 76-year-old man, retired banker. He had
Mhm.
4 hole-in-ones, and he loved bowling, and he wrote a book.
Mhm.
That's different. And that was a thing to me when I saw patients, is I took their social history and I wanted to know,
Mhm.
what it is they did, because I may not remember all the stuff, but I wanted to connect all the dots when they came in. And
Mhm.
that's what made my job so delightful for
Mhm.
my career. I know I'm special in that regard, but otherwise it's the 10th person with diabetes today. And doctors are going to be given a grid to fill out. Did you have your colonoscopy? Did you get your vaccines? Did you get your
Mhm.
mammogram? And let me check it for depression. It's that way. And knowing
Mhm.
that that's where the healthcare system is, we have to be different about it. We have to take it into our own hands. That's why I wrote The Power of Five,
Mhm.
and publish that, and have other books that I've had about aging that people should avail themselves to. On the screen, I've put up, I think it's still there, some of the ways of getting a hold of me by
Mhm.
email or my website, thepowerof5life.com, and check out my books on Amazon, because there's something for everyone who might be in your
Mhm.
audience. I did write a book about addressing driving and taking away the keys from drivers. So
Mhm.
they're all important
And
points, and I'm sure in this summit, Mary Elaine, that you're doing, that there are people who are going to cover some of these other issues as well.
yes, they will be. Thank you for this information. I think um, even as a family member, that um, just making sure, for me, for example, my mother had Alzheimer's, so I made sure that we went walking because she was a walker. We went out to like the Botanic Gardens, and when she couldn't communicate at the very end, we could do touch and smell, and yeah, and it just, I think, enriched her life if we spend that time getting to know the person that we're caring for.
And I'm going to give you one little tidbit that may come up from other people. When you know someone's birthday, add the number 20. So if someone was born in 1935, add 22 at 1955, and
Mhm.
look up the top 10 musical hits for that year.
Mm,
That will awaken them. They will reminisce. They will remember their favorite music, because 18 to 22 is when music gets imprinted in our brains. So if
okay.
all else fails, just put on a music from when they were 20, and it will awaken them up a little bit.
That's great advice. Um, can you give us like 3 takeaways, Dr. Bernstein, of what caregivers can do when they notice someone that they're caring for is feeling lonely, depressed, even? What can you recommend for those caregivers to be more proactive in helping that person you're caring for?
Well, I'd mentioned one, that's easy, music.
Right.
Uh,
Exactly.
if they
Mhm.
like to dance, dance. If they like to cook, bring them in the kitchen. you know, my wife wrote a cookbook for caregivers.
Mhm.
So doing some activity can be helpful. Any activity, something that they might have liked to do. I do believe that exercise and walking is just something that can be done. I
Mhm.
believe people should be in an environment where they're out of doors and with nature, because nature
Mhm.
has some healing benefits. And switch it up, and definitely, you know, go outside your comfort zone and ask someone for help, because you need the break, and you need to
Mhm.
I'm all about learning new things every day.
Mhm.
So in the process of that is, show me something new. Show me that you can do some different mode of action to get help, and rehearse it if you need to. Write a script, rehearse it with somebody, but do it so that you have 5 or 10 people that you can call, because sooner or later someone will come and bail you out and give you a hand. But you got to look in the mirror and take care of yourself.
Well, you do. And you did bring up some really great statistics early on from ARP. And I know it's frightening to think that, like 40% of people who are caregiving don't take care of themselves, and they rate their health as fair to poor, or 40 to 70% of them are clinically depressed. I mean, there's got to be a way, like you're saying, to ask for help, because you can't do it all.
And not, you know, in that, outside that realm of help, is ask for help with putting a plan together with what's going to happen.
Mhm.
I'm going to boast a little bit. It's not a boast, but I'm
Go ahead.
psychic at times, maybe 5 times, but I'm psychic. And I had a husband and wife in my office,
Mhm.
and the man was getting more and more, his dementia was getting worse and worse, and they didn't have family. They were
Mhm.
estranged from children. Let's make it simple. That's what it was. And I looked around and I said, wow, Mr. is really dependent on Mrs. They're the
Mhm.
same age. What if something happens to Mrs.? And I asked her to find the nearest nursing home and
Mhm.
go into the administrator's office as director of admissions and introduce yourself and ask if at any time it's necessary, that if something happens to her, that they will take him in. And she
Mhm.
did it. She was a feisty
Mhm.
little redhead, I think. And she did it. And
Mhm.
like 2 months later, she fell and broke her hip.
Mm.
And she was north of my office and went to a different hospital, and I kind of couldn't get my tentacles involved too much. But I think the emergency room called me, and I said, well, she's got a husband at home who can't take care of himself, but she told me that she had a nursing home all picked out. So go over to her in the emergency room and ask her who's going to pick up her husband and take him to that nursing home. And sure enough, it happened. I mean, that he
Mm.
got into a nursing home. So it was one of those situations I felt really
Yeah.
good about, that I was proactive, or I was psychic, and I kind of knew that something was going to happen.
Mhm.
And it always does. I mean, and it happens in a hurry. There's an abrupt crisis. You know, someone got pneumonia, they fell, they broke their hip. Be
Mhm.
prepared, have a plan. If you don't have a plan, expect to fail and expect a major crisis. And the crises are expensive and painful,
Mhm.
and you don't have the control that you'd like to have.
Oh, well, definitely. Yes, you have to plan before an emergency or a crisis occurs, and you have to have like all of those legal, insurance, and healthcare documents in place, so that other people can step in when you do need the help that you need. So, this has been really enlightening, Dr. Bernstein. So could you give us 3 takeaways that caregivers can start acting upon, so that they can be more proactive in helping someone in those 5 areas, especially with the intimacy aspect, where they can help them get out of their loneliness or their depression, so that they could have a better quality of life. What can you recommend or give 3 takeaways?
I think I'm going to go back to some of my other recommendations, like
Mhm.
get in touch with the area agency on aging,
Yes,
find a
great advice.
geriatric case manager or social
Mhm.
worker, have a family meeting. Hopefully you have a family to call, but have a family meeting and say, I'm swamped here. I'm circling the drain. I need help. Ask for help.
Mhm.
In lots of different ways. Don't go at it alone. Going at it alone is a problem.
Mhm.
And failing to plan is planning to fail.
Great point. Dr. Bernstein, thank you so much
It's
for
my pleasure, Mary Elaine.
providing so much just enriching information that caregivers need to really help the person, not only themselves, but to help the person that they're caring for so that they could have a better quality of life and a better caregiving journey. So thank you so much for being here today
You're welcome.
and offering your wisdom to us. I love the power of 5, and thank you for going through each of those factors and really spending more time like on that sexuality and spirituality and connection.
It's important. You
Most
know,
definitely.
I
Thank
asked
you.
all my patients about their sex lives when they first came in. So, it was an important factor. It's part of life. It's part of breathing and part of eating.
You're right. It certainly is. And it's refreshing to know that you can still have that close connection with someone
Sure.
until, your 70s or 80s or whenever you make that decision together. I think it's amazing. So thank you so much
You're
for
welcome. And great luck.
being
Good luck with the rest of the Caregiver Lifeline Summit.
well, thank you so much. And again, um, people have a way to get in touch with you. So thank you so much
Like
for
you're on the screen all those ways.
most
Good night now.
definitely. Thank you so much.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to the Caregiver Cast today. Get a community of support, resources, and strategies for your caregiving journey inside the Caregiver Lifeline community. Visit caregiverlifelinecommunity.com. Get involved with the show. Send your email to mpetrucci2002@gmail.com. And we'll see you again next week for another episode of Caregiver Cast.